Sandy's having technical difficulties.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Byram, roll call, please.
Yes. Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mrs. Dawson?
Here.
Mrs. Harrington?
Here.
Mrs. Quintern?
Here.
Mr. Rickett?
Here.
Dr. Hornick. The clerk certifies the presence of a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, would you all please stand while the Orange County High School Army JROTC presents the colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Arms. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Forward. Arms. Right shoulder. Arms. Left. Face. Forward. March. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Please be seated. First order of business this evening is to request nominations for chair of the Orange County School Board. At this time, Ms. Byram, we will accept names that are submitted. Are there any nominations?
I would like to nominate Ms. Dawson.
We have one nomination for Ms. Dawson. Are there any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Melissa.
We have a nomination for Ms. Anderson. Are there any other nominations?
No, but could I respectfully decline?
Laura? Yes.
I have a question regarding process. Can I do another one? Can I nominate someone else now?
Yes, it's still open until we close it.
And then once the nominations occur in seconds, do we have discussion on this process?
It's a roll call.
Yeah, so what we will do is if there's more than one name given, Ms. Byram will do a roll call vote, and each member will state the name of the person that he or she is voting for, and then the person with the most votes wins, correct?
And just, I'm sorry for interrupting the middle of it, but I thought it was a discussion that we'd had. And one of the things that I have been very interested in is a level or plan, succession planning and process. And I didn't realize that the nomination and the action item occurred before the opportunity to have that kind of a discussion. So are we able to have a discussion to that level, or at least?
Well, the nominations are open. If you want to make another nomination, and then before we close them, I don't see why we can't have discussion.
Is that okay with you, Chair Anderson?
I'm not chair right now.
Oh, you're not anybody right now, sorry. Would that be, thumbs up, would that be something that the board would be okay with, is to just have a little bit more of a discussion before we finalize the action item on this?
I'm fine with a discussion. I know that previously, before you all were on the board, I did have a concern about, with elections coming up, what happens when, if Melissa or I don't win the next election, should we choose to run, then what happens? And that's why Melissa actually became vice chair, so that way the vice chair had the opportunity to learn about the position and learn about planning the agenda and running meetings. And so that's kind of why I had suggested Darlene last year, because I knew that she was on an off election cycle.
I had spoken earlier today with Ms. Anderson to talk, just about letting her know that I would be bringing this forward. And we had talked about what was the policy number that you reflected? BCA, something to that effect, that you said had already had language inserted in there that had some kind of a secession, that the vice president would be the next year?
No, I don't recall giving you a policy. No, I had said that I had brought it up at the board meeting prior to, I believe it was my second year in the term, which is what Ms. Quintern had mentioned about not, or having somebody that was in the opposite election cycle in the chair or vice chair position.
The only thing that BCA says is that the term is for 1 year.
Okay, so again, I thought that we talked earlier today, Ms. Anderson, and you reflected that that had been a discussion, and that at least that piece of it was type of a secession plan, but it didn't accurately reflect that, to my opinion. So I may have just misunderstood you.
No, I don't remember mentioning the policy, but, I mean, it was more of just a board agreement that we had decided at that point.
Okay, so right now, we do not have in policy anything that directs us to an order of secession or thing like.
Not that I'm
No.
aware of.
Okay. So, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I believe that we need to have a conversation regarding a secession plan. I don't think that it is in our best interest or in our students' or constituencies' best interest to have members on the board acting as chair or vice chair on multiple years. I believe that we need to make sure that each member has the opportunity to participate in the governance process, and that there should be 1 to 2 years for members to learn that process as we go forward. So I also believe that if we have a clear secession plan, it reduces any political gamesmanship and control issues. It provides a level of respect to our district constituents, and it does provide flexibility for members to decline, as Ms. Dawson just did. And I'm not saying that this has to occur tonight, but I think that it's something we need to take into consideration. So, for example, in my scenario, in my head, year one, a board member would have the opportunity to learn kind of how it goes and sit throughout as a member. Year two, that person would then become the vice president, whoever we nominated. Year three, the person who is vice president would succeed to the president or chair's position, I guess. And then year four, that chair, because it would be election year for them, would not have the responsibility of the chairs, but could also be a mentor to the next person in that succession role. So I just want to, bring that out before we go forward, because I think that it just will provide, again, a more open and appropriate method of going forward. If anybody has any thoughts?
I like the idea, but it doesn't match the current policy on the books. So that will have to be a policy change that we agree to going forward as we discuss it. And for tonight, we're going to have to do what policy says.
And the BCA
That's my
policy was 1
understanding.
year?
1 year,
Can
right. It's BCA. It
If I
says-
may, propose that we discuss this in the legislative committee and draft a policy to bring back before the board at a later time.
Okay. I think that that's probably a good idea. Looking at the policy again, the BCA policy, it does specifically state the terms of the chair, clerk, vice chair, and deputy clerk are 1 year, but it doesn't limit them to just that 1 year. So maybe if the board, again, thumbs up, would be willing to allow Chelsea and I to work on this together, or if we develop a policy committee subsequent to our next discussion later this evening, whoever and is going to be on that type of a committee could take that from us. Reasonable? Okay? Okay. So did you?
Okay, so
Thank you for allowing me to have that conversation. I appreciate
absolutely.
it.
So at this moment, we have 2 nominations. One has bowed out gracefully, and so we have 1 nomination for chair. Are there any others?
I would like to nominate Jack Rickett for chair.
Any other? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion that we close nominations for chair?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Those in favor of closing the nominations signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please signify with no. So nominations are closed. So we have more than one name that has been brought forward. Mr. Rickett and Mrs. Anderson have been nominated for chair. So at this time, Ms. Byram will call the roll. Each board member shall state the name of the individual nominated that you would like to have as chair. The individual with the most votes shall be declared chairman for 2025. Ms. Byram?
Ms. Anderson,
Ms. Anderson?
Ms. Dawson,
Mrs. Anderson?
Weird.
Ms. Harrington.
Mr. Rickett.
Sorry, I'm just trying to record it. Ms. Quintern
Mrs. Anderson?
and Mr. Rickett.
As weird as it feels, I will vote for myself.
So congratulations, Ms. Anderson, the chair for 2025. I'm going to bring this to you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Moving on, nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Ms. Dawson.
Are there any other nominations? Nope. Hearing none. Is there a motion?
I move to close nominations.
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? All right. So we only have one nomination. Ms. Dawson, congratulations.
Thank you.
And then we move on to appointment of the
Wait,
clerk.
We still need a roll call. Well, we need a roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So we actually need a motion first
Yes,
to
we need a
nominate
motion.
Ms. Dawson.
And a second for approval of election of
Oh,
Ms.
sorry.
Dawson.
I move to nominate Mrs. Dawson as vice chair.
I have a second.
Second.
All those in, roll call, sorry, Ms. Byram.
Okay, Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Dawson,
Aye.
Ms. Harrington,
Aye.
Ms. Quintern,
Aye.
Mr. Rickett.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is passed by a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. Question, so the clerk and all the other ones, those are all roll call as well?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
No. Sorry.
I don't believe it's a roll call.
don't-
It is, it's not a roll call. No, ma'am.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right, so may I have a nomination for our board clerk?
I would like to nominate Ms. Byram if she would accept the nomination.
Second.
You can say no.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All right, may I have a motion to accept Ms. Byram as clerk?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second.
I seconded.
Frazzled over there.
What,
Yeah.
You need another
Madam
motion.
Chair, what, could you,
Oh, sorry.
recall the?
May I have a motion to approve Ms. Byram as clerk?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on, deputy clerk.
Madam Chair, I nominate Mrs. Dawson as deputy clerk if she so accepts.
Clarifying.
The
This
other
Ms.
Mrs. Dawson.
Yes. Mrs. Y. Dawson.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. May I have a motion to approve Ms. Y. Dawson as our deputy clerk?
So moved. Yep.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Last on this part of it, the board meeting schedule. Are there any discussions or changes? Currently, it's the first Monday of each month, beginning at 7, and and our regular meeting, and our work session is the last Monday of each month, beginning at 7.
I move to approve is it the calendar or the schedule? The 2025 school board meeting schedule.
May I have a second?
Before you second it, can we make any accommodations at all? The 7 o'clock is crazy. Can we move the work session up or the regular meeting up an hour? We've been talking about it for a while now.
Do we need a second for discussion?
Yes, we need a second for discussion, and then we can discuss, Mr. Rickett.
Second.
Discussion. Thank you. Is there any conflicts with anybody's schedule for the earlier time frame for either
I
or?
wouldn't be able to make it on time.
On one Monday out of the month, an hour earlier.
Yes.
And this predates my time here, but I thought the whole idea was to allow working parents an opportunity to show up with us and participate in the meetings. I mean, I know they're videotaped too, but some people probably could not get here by 6. I hear you, Jack. Sometimes it gets long and late.
Well, the school board is the only board in the entire county that meets at 7. Every other board, EDA, planning, every other board is 5 o'clock.
I can't get to any of them by 5 o'clock.
No, I'm not suggesting 5 o'clock. I'm absolutely, and I completely understand the point of view of wanting parents to have the flexibility to get here, but I just. Anyway, discussion over.
Ms. Harrington, did you have anything?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome. May I rephrase the motion? Ms. Quinter?
I move to approve the 2025 school board meeting schedule as presented.
We already had
You
it.
guys use your microphones better. I can't hear, yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. We have a second already on the table, and all those in favor by continuing the board meeting schedule as presented?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion passes. Appointment of representatives. Is there any changes that we would like to make on any of the committees or appointments for the governor's school or the education program board, any of that? Or is everybody pretty content with their positions there?
I didn't catch it when the agenda went out, but Ms. Harrington and I also serve on the OCPS Safe and Secure Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was a new appointment in the last quarter.
Gotcha.
Ms. Anderson, if I may, just for discussion purposes and continuity so it makes sense to people, I do believe that these committee positions should be a multi-year designation because I think it's so important to maintain that historical and institutional knowledge from one year to the other. So I'm kind of different between the actual positions up here versus the committee positions. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but that would be my interest. And so at this point, I would definitely like to continue for the second year on those committees that I currently represent. The board.
Thank you. All right.
At one point, we did discuss possibly getting rid of or altering the CIP committee due to some of the hiccups that we've had. I don't know if we want to have discussion on what we want to see with that committee.
What are the hiccups?
A lot of it was we had some lacking information, and it seemed that the board's it seemed like decisions were made prior to coming to the entire board, without formal approval from one board or the other. I talked to other board members on the supervisor side, and they also weren't privy to some of the information that had come out of the CIP committee. And so I don't see the value in it. I feel that it caused a little bit more headache than camaraderie.
Ms. Quinton, I'm not quite following what you're suggesting. Do you want an additional alternative? Is that what you said to begin with? Or you don't think that this committee should exist at all?
I think that we should at least all have a designee on the committee.
As you have suggested in the past. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
That would be my preference, so that way we could each have an appointee that could serve our district's interests, and we could meet with our appointee, and they could serve in that capacity on the committee.
Personally, I don't think that that is appropriate. I think that we have been elected to serve the public in this role, and that it is up to us to take on that responsibility in full. Relative to the hiccups or glitches from last year, I think that, again, we had great conversations at our retreat, and I have full faith that we will have a more robust feedback from whoever is on that committee going forward. So I don't agree or support having a member of the public in our place. I don't. So thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Further clarification, Ms. Quintern, when you said you don't see the value in it, did you mean you don't see the value in that committee, period? That's what you're talking about?
As it stands, correct. I don't feel the value, and I don't feel that all perspectives were fairly represented in that capacity, and I think we should have the ability to do so. And so if we don't move forward with the designee, then I think it would be appropriate for us to be on the committee as we desire as board members. And we could have just a big group working session to tackle any CIP projects that are coming our way in the school division.
Would it be under consideration if we were to everybody be appointed to the committee, but then we alternate when each person would get to meet, so that everybody would, let's say we had 5 meetings a year, everybody would get to go to one of those meetings.
I
that
feel like
everybody
that
would
would cause a lack of continuity in the discussion, because, well, one of the things that Ms. Harrington and I talked about that's coming up later in this meeting in the norms and protocols is the necessity of each of these committees sharing all information with the other members immediately following committee meetings, so that this hiccup or glitch or what you're talking about does not occur again. So if we can improve our system of communication, I think having 2 members, I mean, if all of us go, then we have to publicize it as a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we could do that, and whoever wants to show up can show up as long as it's publicized.
I would find that most appropriate, only because the communication was also, we didn't have the opportunity to voice our thoughts and our opinions prior to the meeting happening. So we weren't able to have our positions represented. And so by the time a project came back to the whole of the board, it was like, well, why are you throwing a wrench into the plans when we didn't have the opportunity to be part of that initial development?
You've you're going into your 4th year, right? On
Correct.
the board? Okay, 4th year on the board. So we're trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm not for a designee. I'm not for all board members. We got 2. We need to have the flexibility to have conversations with our counterparts. At the end of the day, whether you agree with it or not, we have to meet with the supervisors, because that's where we get our money from. They're not going to want to be in a public meeting discussing CIP meetings when these are initial discussions. These are brainstorming ideas. you had called it a hiccup before. We delayed votes for 2 months for presentations. And our retreat part, I think it's fair to say half of the retreat. Fair to say half of the retreat was designated to the presentation of a different idea. And then it moved forward. So
I'm not disagreeing that there were some changes positively that were made, but at that point it was too late, in my opinion. So if we're not willing to make any changes to the CIP committee, then I would like to be on the CIP committee. I'd be willing to step down from another committee.
My question would be, obviously, there are some things that are coming up in the norms and protocols regarding committees and how we are to report out of them. Would you be opposed to us creating some type of form per se that basically stating the things, or having stating the things that we were discussing, or having somebody take minutes of those meetings?
That doesn't change the fact that you're not part of the conversation prior to the meeting happening, and so you're not able to represent your position during those meetings. So
I don't understand why anything prevents us from talking to whomever those committee members are prior to the meeting and sharing our thoughts. Could you please express thus and so when you attend the CIP committee meeting? Right?
correct, but at the same time, when we've had issues of not having that communication, how do we know what is being discussed at those meetings?
It might be appropriate and fill that need to make sure that that is a standing agenda item. So immediately after any of our meetings, we send out a little blurb to all of our board members so you know the big picture, the areas of discussions. If we want to ask additional questions, we can do that. And then at the meeting, we get a little bit more information in a formal setting and in a public environment. Would that maybe help you feel more comfortable with being involved in the process and having an opportunity to state and advocate for your positions and your constituents?
That would be a step in the right direction. I have grave concerns with the experience from last year.
Would it be, would the board agree that we could possibly do it in the manner I just suggested and reevaluate it when we have our summer retreat and we look to see how some of these things are working out for us? Would that seem appropriate to any of the board members?
I think that would be appropriate.
I think that's fair.
Okay. Can we, Dr. Hornick,
Yes, ma'am.
can you make sure that that is, in writing so we don't lose that thought and we make sure and follow up with those things? Thank you.
So the way I'm understanding it is you'll send out a communication to other board members immediately following a committee meeting, and then it will also be a report on the agenda. Is that how you want to do it from those committees?
Yes, please.
And I think she was mentioning having a special slot in there for reports. I mean, we normally put it under board member items, but maybe there's a subcategory under that that's specifically for that.
And I would further suggest that, some of the committees don't meet but quarterly or whatever. I'm specifying the CIP that is a standing agenda item. So we're always having that conversation. Okay, thank you.
All right, no changes there.
Okay, example, we met Friday as a finance group. And the outcome of Friday is going to be what I'm presenting this evening. Is that acceptable?
I think as long as there's a report out and, if there's an agenda prepared ahead of the meeting, possibly send that out to the entire board so we know what that committee is meeting on. I know for Head Start, for example, we had a meeting today. I could send that agenda out when I receive it, so that way if there's any questions, you guys can contact me before I go into the meeting. And then tonight I have prepared a couple of lines to report out of what happened at the meeting. But if there's no formal,
And Dr. Hornick, I
Yes, ma'am.
would think that the meeting that Chair Anderson and I attended with you last week was kind of at the same time that policy and agenda was being developed. So it kind of would have went out immediately within that time frame, but there was a little issue that prevented that from happening. So, I mean, if we're going to be bringing it to the board within a couple days, we're still going to have it on that agenda. Does the board want us to still send out a little blurb about this is what's going on, or is that a sufficient time frame for notification?
I think as long as it's either in a public forum or electronically, I think either way would be acceptable.
I would agree that any type of report, whether it comes from Dr. Hornick or if it comes from the board, it's still a report based on the committee meeting, would be my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to provisions of annual notifications.
Do we need to make
We
a
need
motion?
to-
We can do it as a group. It doesn't
have Okay. to
be each individually.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the committee appointees?
So moved.
As amended.
As
If I could
amended, I'm
offer a-
sorry, we have the OCPS Safe and Supportive Committee. That Ms. Quintern and Ms. Harrington are on. All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on. Provisions and annual notifications. Ms. Byram, would you like to clarify anything on that?
Sorry. No, these are the, just that these are the most recent. I went on to the Code of Virginia site, so these are the most recent versions. And should you want me to print them out for you so that you can have a hard copy, I'll be happy to do so.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Have to approve it. Okay.
Location of the Orange County School Board Policy. BF, as outlined in the School Board Policy BF, Board Policy Manual, a current copy of the division's policies will be posted on the division's website. The school board also ensures that printed copies of the policies are available as needed to citizens who do not have online access. And then certification of rules of order. Do I have a motion?
I move to use the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order.
Do I have a second?
Second, and could I have discussion for just a moment? Definitely would like to second, and I would also like to ask the board if they would be in favor of directed administration to get us some additional training on our Robert's Rules. I feel like I would like to have some additional training from someone that's an expert in the subject matter so that I fully understand and can use it appropriately to professionally manage our meetings, be aware of how those things occur.
I had actually suggested the same thing, been thinking the same thing for a year, basically. And I do have a contact for a parliamentarian. I think that would be very useful for all of us.
Is that something we could direct the administration to set up for us?
I think that it would be.
So if we're talking about Robert's Rules, this isn't really an appropriate, motion. I don't know if this is another motion or,
Well, I think that I don't know if we need to make a motion on certification of the rules of order. This is kind of outside that. This is just a discussion. Maybe it should have been more appropriate down under board comments. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can bring it back then.
yeah, I'm not opposed to your idea.
Okay.
Just putting that out there, but.
I'll just bring it back up. Thank you.
All right, we have a second. All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
And authorization of signature in absence of the division superintendent. May I have a motion to approve Ms. Lisa Frady Lawhorn, our Chief Financial Officer, as the designee?
I make a motion to designate Ms. Lisa Frady-Lawhorn, our Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Susan Ayler, Executive Director of Special Education and Student Services, to sign or authorize department documents in the absence of the division superintendent through January 31st, 2026.
Second?
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, now we're on to School Board Code of Conduct, and then we also have the Board Governance and Norms and Protocols in this section. Each year, as part of the reorganizational meeting, the board reviews and adopts a code of conduct. The code is designed to serve as guidelines for certain behaviors expected of board members. By adopting and signing, board members agree to follow the code in their service as board members throughout the year. We have the draft document, and then also we have, during the board's retreat, members tasked Ms. Dawson and Ms. Harrington with creating a draft board governance norms and protocols document for discussion. Again, they're very similar, or they have some similarities to them, so we felt that putting them together and discussing them at one time. So, since it is Ms. Dawson and Ms. Harrington's, would you like to?
Ms. Dawson, I know at one time you and I had discussed reading through the Code of Conduct during board meetings. I don't know if you wanted to have us go through that and kind of read that, and then maybe you could lead us forward in the conversation of what we developed, how, and what our thought process was, and get feedback on that.
Are you talking about the code of conduct or the new document?
I was
Norms and
talking about
protocols?
the Code of Conduct, just, my belief is that they align, and we didn't want to duplicate, so we're presenting the governance document.
Right, so
But I didn't know if we wanted to go through that first. I thought it might be.
essentially, the norms and protocols document duplicates the code of conduct in almost every item. So my thought was to merge it into one more, succinct document than, well, I don't know how succinct it is, but but it has all of the code of conduct items included in it, I believe.
And I agree with that. I mean, you and I had that individual conversation as we were developing this. But I was just concerned. I didn't know if there was any concern relative to eliminating that code of conduct individual page, because it's not reflected as a whole within our governance norms document, and it's just something that I thought of today. So
Right,
again,
and
just a thought.
I did, when the thought occurred to me, I did look for any kind of policy or regulation that says we must have a code of conduct, and I couldn't find one. I think it's a voluntary thing that we decide as a board. So we can voluntarily shift everything into the other document if that's the will of the board to do that. And I don't know in terms of, all of you were provided with this draft document before our canceled meeting 2 weeks ago. It was slightly updated to merge the two documents, but do we need to go through each individual item tonight? Or just have, if you have issues with anything, have discussion on it?
I have no issues.
We'd like to make a motion to discuss.
I would like to make a motion.
I was
Go
going
ahead.
to say, I would prefer to leave this as a first read,
Okay.
because I do have some stuff that I would like to talk to each of you individually about, just because it'd be a lengthy evening conversation,
right,
and
it
I don't,
will.
I don't want to prolong it for you all or for any of you all out there.
I'm fine with that. First
Would we
read.
be opposed to approving tonight the board code of conduct and making amendments to the norms and protocols to reflect the code of conduct, and then we can have that combined as one? Or do we want to just hold off on the board of code of conduct and the governance thing and have discussion on it at a later date?
Could we table it to the next meeting, maybe? If we're going to merge both.
Well, I think that what we have in place right now that's within the agenda attachment does merge those both.
Okay.
My thought would have been that we go ahead and formally adopt the board governance norms and protocols with the understanding that the code of conduct is embedded in it, and that we adopt it as a living document so that we have the ability to make adjustments going forward, and that is also put on the agenda for our annual retreat so that we look at it each year and make sure it is something that is working for us, or if it is not, that we are taking proactive steps to address it.
Yeah. My only concern is I do have some questions and possibly some revisions to it. So if we can table that for the next meeting, that way we can have
That would be
open
fine.
discussion.
As long as there's no issue with tabling that. Do we have to have that approved at this meeting?
Has to
Okay.
be a motion.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so we will move on. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, and then I will pass it over to you, Miss, 1 second, sorry. I will open up public comment. The Orange County School Board recognizes the importance of maintaining a respectful and orderly environment during school board meetings. Therefore, we kindly request that all comments made are relevant to the field of pre-K through 12 public education and pertain to the matters concerning the school board and division. We ask that individuals refrain from using offensive language, engaging in vulgar and profane behavior, or making comments or taking actions that may incite violence or disrupt the peace. Unless otherwise authorized by the chair, each speaker is allotted a maximum of 3 minutes to express their views. To uphold decorum, we kindly request that applause, noise-making, or other disruptive behaviors be avoided before, during, and after a member of the public addresses the board. It is important to note that public comment is intended for addressing the board, and therefore comments should be directed solely towards the board members. Furthermore, it is expected that board members will refrain from engaging in dialogue with the speakers during this time, as it is an opportunity for the board to actively listen to thoughts, concerns, and feedbacks of the public. Any conduct that violates the established decorum and order as determined by the chair or their designee may result in disciplinary actions, including potential expulsion from the meeting. Alternatively, written comments may be submitted to the board members via email. It is critical to emphasize that these guidelines are not intended to restrict freedom of speech, but rather to ensure effective communication between the public and their public servants. We eagerly anticipate your valuable contributions and feedback. Ms. Byram, do we have anybody that signed up?
No, ma'am.
So I read that. All right, then I will close public comment. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, approval of the minutes, financial reports, and monthly operating bills. Is there any questions, or may I have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve as presented.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, action items. Dr. Hornick, the consideration of the overnight field trip.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. This one is coming to you from DECA. This is to attend the State Leadership Conference. Ms. Day Owens and Ms. Brooks at the high school. And as you can see, the funding source from a mixture of activity funds, donations, fundraisers, and we would like to send our students to this overnight trip, February 28th through March the 2nd.
Is there any questions?
No, I think this is a great opportunity for our students, and I would definitely support this, so I make a motion to approve.
May I have a
Thank you.
second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Next, I will bring Ms. Dawson forward if there are any follow-up questions. This proposed policy revision is with respect to staff leave. And again, Ms. Dawson is here to answer any additional questions that the board might have.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the new regulation GCBDR, regulations pertaining to sick leave, and delete regulations GCBD-R1, GCBD-R2, and GCBEA.
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Lisa, Ms. Brady Lawhorn is also here. This is a $7,000 supplemental appropriation, I believe Title II,
Title II.
and we are seeking approval
Yes.
next week. But if you would so choose, we would be happy to move forward now.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the supplemental appropriations totaling $7,000 increase in revenue and expenses.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor
May
by?
I ask a question?
Sure.
real quickly? What are the Title II funds used for?
You want to go, Lance?
Primarily
No, go ahead.
staff professional
Professional
development.
Okay.
development.
That's what I thought. I just wasn't sure if that was still accurate. So
Yes.
thank you. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This evening, next in reports is to begin kind of the formal process of what we are looking to do with our budget. And so Ms. Byram will present. And our theme this year is going to be to do everything we can to take care of those who are taking care of our students. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a moment. If you go next, Laura. First, this is just a recap of where we stand. This is January 27th, where we have budget priorities. Of course, we have a meeting next week where we will have a public comment dedicated to anything that our community would like to discuss regarding the FY26 budget. In about a month from now, our goal is to present the proposed budget to the board. On March 3rd, we will have our public hearing on the budget, which is required by law. And so this will have, folks will have had the opportunity to participate in a number of ways, either via survey, coming to the roundtable, 3 different public comment opportunities dedicated specifically to the budget, including the public hearing. And then we have basically started to set aside Mondays in March if we need anything to do with a work session to reconcile or do any budget work, or hopefully to get the budget passed in short order so that we can get it over to our friends across the street, so to speak, for their consideration. And again, much like last year, it is likely that it is possible that the budget that the school board would approve sometime in March may not ultimately be the final budget, as we have to come back and do some reconciliation depending on how revenues are looking. So we will keep you all apprised as we move forward. I did want to share just a little bit of the information about our budget survey that we did, and in particular the bottom left-hand quadrant of the pie chart shows that our respondents this year placed a very high value to allocate resources to make sure that we're maintaining competitive salaries. And that will be the theme of what we're going to be trying to accomplish this year. And so without further ado, Laura, if you would go forward, I'd like to start this year to talk a little bit about where we see our priorities in salaries and benefits. Go ahead, Laura. So first of all, as has been the case in the past, certainly since I have been here and probably a little bit before that, or maybe long before that, we like to, if at all possible and at all costs, try to absorb health insurance increases to not pass those along to our employees. That would be a priority this year. Of course, much of it will depend on what revenues and expenses look like and what health insurance numbers look like. However, this would certainly be a priority. In line with the biennium budget from the state of Virginia, we know that all of our neighbors and just about every school division across Virginia will be giving their employees a 3% raise at a minimum. And so tonight we're going to identify a few particular groups of classifications of employees that we would like to pursue, in some cases a considerably higher raise than 3%. But this would be our target. This would be the minimum that we would want to do. That way we can assure that we are at least keeping up with where we currently stand in the pecking order of pay and benefits with divisions. If you move forward, Laura. The areas that we have, and this is not the full exhaustive list, and we are hopeful that we can add more to it. But as a first kind of report out in areas that we know that we are considerably behind even what would be the middle of the market in which we compete. These are areas that we know that we need to do a heavy lift and make some significant growth in our teacher pay, our instructional assistant pay, our administrative assistant pay, and our custodian pay. So Yvonne, be ready to give me those numbers that I didn't bring with me. Next. We will spend some time on this chart for a moment, because once we go through this chart, you will have an idea of basically how we are looking at our comparison divisions. So what you see before you is a chart that highlights the first 15 steps on our teacher pay scale. And of course, in the orange column, you will see what Orange County currently pays teachers right now in the 24-25 school year. What we did is we compared this to our most significant regional competitors, all of the school divisions that physically and geographically touch Orange County, as well as ones that are just kind of one step beyond. Albemarle, Culpeper, Fauquier, Greene, Louisa, Madison, Spotsylvania, and Stafford. And what we did to try to make it easy to understand and get a sense of where we are, we looked at the, statistically speaking, the median of the market. So there are 9 school divisions, and you simply find which number is in the middle. And you can see where we rank 1 to 9. We are competitive in the first few steps, and then it devolves quickly from there. And I will tell you that on the next slide, when you see 16 through 20, we remain number 8 all the way through step 30, meaning we are second to last on every single step from step 6 to step 30. And how far we differ from the mean is also identified in the column. So where we are the mean, our difference is $0, and then we continue a downward trend. So what we would like to pursue this year, we started off with a goal of how do we get as many of our teachers to the median as possible. However, we know, and I know from conversations and superintendent meetings with our nearest competitors, I have a pretty good sense of what our neighboring divisions want to do next year as far as a pay raise. So the problem is we cannot attack the current median because that number is going to move next year. What is the median now will not be the median next year. To truly move ourselves and get ourselves, and again, we're talking about trying to get us to the middle of the market. I have said since the beginning that I've been here that we do not necessarily have to be number 1. We can't be last or second to last. So what we did is we took a look at each step and looked at what each step would be if you took the median plus an additional 7%. Now, the issue is that mathematically, if you simply do that, because each school division, as you can see, tries to maintain some consistency with how the dollar amount there is between each step. But when you do a statistical calculation, for instance, Louisa isn't necessarily the mean on every step. Sometimes, a few steps, it might be Louisa, then it might be Fauquier, that it might be Culpeper. So what we needed to do is we needed to take a look at the steps, get as close as we could to that target, and then we did have to adjust some of our steps so that we could maintain some integrity and some consistency across our steps. What we didn't want was a second-year teacher to go into their third year and get an $1,100 raise with an $1,100 step, and whereas a fourth-year teacher going into their fifth year gets a $218 pay raise. And so what you will see on the FY26, what we would like to propose for a scale, is in the first few years, I want to say maybe the first 4, we have $400 between each step, and then it progressively increases to $600 to $800 to $1,000 and then to $1,350. So if Laura, if you would go to the next slide. This next slide is the exact same slide. It shows Orange County Public Schools steps 16 through 30. So again, you can see where we are 8th in rank. We continue to get farther and farther away from the median. And so what we have here is an overall investment trying to get our teachers up to par with a 13.32% increase. And you can see that from steps 16 through 30, there is $1,350 between each step. It is consistent. So this work not only helps us achieve a long-held dream of this school division to approach and attack the median of the market, it also corrects even currently where we have some variations in gaps on the pay scale. There is much more parity and much more consistency and integrity with this pay scale. So this is where we are, our early indicators of this is where we would like to go with our teacher pay scale. If you wouldn't mind, please go into the next slide. How we handle teachers with a master's degree is they are on the teacher scale that you just saw, and they get an additional $3,000. And so what you see here is in these two charts, in orange is what we currently pay our teachers who have a master's degree. And if you go back, you will see that we currently pay teachers with a bachelor's at step 0, $53,848. Plus $3,000, we pay our teachers with a master's $56,848. So we would like that number to be $60,617, and so on and so forth as you go through the master's degree scale. Next, Laura, if you wouldn't mind. We have also done some work with our instructional assistants. These are very, very important employees to what we do day in and day out in the classroom. And it has been, I suspect, probably quite a number of years since we tried to make, or were able to make, a sizable investment in our instructional assistant salaries. Again, you can see what we currently pay versus what we hope that we can accomplish. We used a similar strategy of looking at as many divisions. Now, it's a little bit more difficult with instructional assistants. Some divisions use pay bands as opposed to steps. Some just flat out don't even post their IA scales, and some don't respond to us when we seek to find out what their pay scales are. However, we did have enough to get an idea of where the current median is with an additional percentage, and if I'm remembering correctly, the investment here is over 9% on average across this scale that we would like to increase our instructional assistants. Next, please, Laura. We are going to do the same work for the folks that you see here in front of you. And what we would like to do for our custodians, whose current starting salary is $14.56 an hour, we would like to at least get them to $16 an hour. Honestly, I would like to attack more, but again, it's going to be a numbers game, and we'll have to see where the revenues lie But it is really difficult to make it on $14.56 an hour. Unfortunately, we have some folks who fall in actually less than that. Our administrative assistants, the backbone of the organization, incredibly hard and diligent workers who are committed. These folks are starting right now at $14.23 an hour. They are worth tremendously more than that. And so what we would like to do this year for our building-based administrative assistants, we would like to get them to at least $17.50 an hour, and that would funnel all the way down through the entire group as well as into our central office administrative assistants who have an even greater level of responsibility handling division-wide matters. We also want to correct how we compensate our head custodians. We would like to have all of our head custodians on one scale, where we would like to start them also at a minimum of $17.50 an hour. And then based on how many students attend each building and go to school, including our pre-K programming, we would like to have additional compensation in increments of $400 based on the number of students that attend a particular building. So it would be true that the head custodian at the high school that's addressing quite a bit of square footage and 1,500 students would have a little bit bigger of a stipend than the head custodian at Locust Grove Primary School, who has a smaller facility and 490 students, as an example. So we find that this would be the best way for us to clean up the scales and compensate our head custodians appropriately, and acknowledge that there is a difference when you are managing larger facilities that have more students, and in particular, those larger facilities often come with night activities as well, which leads to more cleaning, more work, more oversight, etc. Next, please, Laura. We also are going to have to create some new positions for any number of reasons. We will start at the primary school. We have 7 first grade teachers currently. However, we have 8 kindergarten and 8 second grade teachers. The students who are leaving kindergarten and going to first grade, we are going to need an 8th teacher. However, the incoming kindergarten class is not trending to be smaller than the kindergarten class that's going to first grade. In fact, it's trending bigger. And so it will not be as simple as having a kindergarten teacher loop and go with the first grade, because we're going to leave kindergarten in a lurch with class numbers that aren't sustainable. So we know we're going to need to add a first grade teacher, first grade teaching position to Locust Grove Primary. Quite frankly, in order to provide the services and the instruction that the Virginia Literacy Act requires, we need to have another reading specialist at the primary school based on what we need to deliver and the needs of the student. Our self-contained programming is growing at a tremendous rate, and I don't know if you have any specifics, Susan, or if not, we can bring them next week. As a one-off, I think it's very important for this board and this community to recognize that when we look at the need to expand facilities or add classroom space, it always doesn't just quote-unquote happen through more students coming to the building. If we have the same number of students numerically, but we have a greater number of those students whose IEPs call for self-contained programming, and we are required to meet those services, we need to create those spaces. So those are classroom facilities that no longer house a general education class of 23. It is now a self-contained program that holds 8 to 10. Okay? So you can't just simply look at population growth as the one sole driver of needing additional space. We are going to have to add a self-contained program at the Locust Grove Elementary campus. We're going to have to do some work over the summer to physically and to structurally get the building ready to be able to accept this program. And we will need 2 instructional assistant positions to support. We will need to do the same thing at Unionville to add a special education program, self-contained, as well as 2 IA positions. Did I misstate anything there, Susan, from special ed perspective? Okay. Next, please. There are ratios that have come out that we need to meet with respect to ELL teachers, okay, second language learners who can speak any language. All right, and so we need to meet those service times that we are required to do. And there is basically a metric where we have to have, and Judy, you can correct me, one teacher for every 20 students that are identified as a level 1 EL learner, 1 teacher for, there's a metric. And we know that we are a few teachers short right now of actually meeting the staffing requirement. However, let's just say that the staffing requirement tells us we have to add 2. I will tell you that we're going to need to add more than 2 because the staffing requirement is simply a mathematical equation that looks at the number of students across a division. I might have 6 at Lightfoot, and we need to make sure we have service there, but I might have 56 at Orange Elementary School. So the math problem will tell you how many you're supposed to have, but you can't physically split a human being to go and be in 2 places at one time. We will, when we're looking at ELL teachers, we know that we're going to need at least 1 at Orange County High School, 1 at Prospect Heights, 1 at Locust Grove Middle, and 1 at the elementary level. That would be a minimum. It could be as high as 5, and we will look at that. We want to continue to expand our career and technical education offerings. The 2 programs that we would like to hire are great because they don't pinch us a whole lot for space. In particular, a criminal justice program, which can complete with the criminology that we currently teach, can be taught in a traditional classroom. And this is a wonderful program to offer to our students. The teacher, to get certified, needs to either have a degree in criminal justice or have a technical professional license, and they have spent time in the field of law enforcement in some capacity. We would also like to bring back to the high school, this is a program we have had in the past, and it is sorely missing, TV, video, media, broadcasting. Talking about a program with internship opportunities to make money, opportunities to brand the school as well as the school division, having students live announce basketball games, baseball games, football games. The possibilities are endless. I had an incredibly high-functioning program when I was at my previous spot as a principal, and it was invaluable, particularly when we were trying to do virtual graduations or virtual award ceremonies during COVID, which of course was difficult, but that made it much easier. We also need to add a reading specialist to Orange County High School, much for the same reason that we needed at the primary school in order to deliver the services that we know will be required, and we need to make sure that our students are ready to be successful when they leave. Next, please, Laura. As I said a moment ago, we have an ever-growing number of students in self-contained programs, which subsequently means we have greater need in these programs. We have 1 employee in this school division who specializes in helping our teachers and our students with behavior, and behavior management. That one individual is no longer enough to meet that need. And so we would like to hire a coach who would work inside of these self-contained intensive programs to work with students and primarily work with our teachers and our IAs to help them be able to navigate and address effectively any needs that they see coming up in the classroom, particularly from a behavior perspective.
Susan, would that fall under mental health?
Not, it's, what we have right now is she's a behavior specialist. She's a board certified behavior analyst. So it would be somebody along those lines who can work as far as ABA programming, discrete trial training, coaching our teachers, that type of thing.
Thank you.
We are blessed with 3 of the best, but there are only 3. And it is no longer sustainable to function with 3 school social workers. As the needs intensify, as the focus on attendance becomes even greater, particularly with the new rollout of the school performance framework, we need to provide some relief in that department and find a 4th social worker. Quite honestly, 4 is probably not enough, but it's a really good start. School psychologist. I think we've been trying to find a school psychologist for 6 years, 5 years, not really sure, as well as a speech pathologist. We need these positions. If not, we are going to, the cost of everything is going up. And so if we have to contract these services out, either way, we know we're going to have to find an increase here. Our preference would be to acquire certified, trained employees to serve in these capacities, but we know that more money is going to be needed in these areas. Next, please. There is currently some legislation moving through the General Assembly that takes a page out of the Virginia Literacy Act book, and I will say it's VLA light, meaning it doesn't require the expensive purchase of curriculum and materials, but it mirrors the Virginia Literacy Act in that it sets parameters for how many math specialists you should have in your school division. And how it reads currently is 1 for every 500 students. So if you do the math with 5,000 students, you can see where, if this would come to fruition, we would be in quite a lurch trying to hire 9 or 10 people. So what we would like to do this year, assuming that that doesn't necessarily go through, we know that it is best practice to begin to expand our instructional support, and we would like to acquire 2 math specialists, one that would work at the elementary level, one that would work at the secondary level, to begin to improve not only our student performance, but also the ability of our teachers and their capacity for teaching mathematics and improving that instruction. Currently, all of our registrars, except our high school registrar, are 11-month contracts. That puts us in, I'll spare you the details, but it makes it nearly impossible to keep up with enrollments, transfers, special education work as we move through the summer months in particular. And what we ultimately end up doing is paying hourly, asking folks to come in. It would be a much better investment to have all of our registrars be 12-month. And that would have wide-ranging benefits to all of our buildings. And so when we say all registrars to 12-month, we would be looking at the 8 remaining registrars who aren't. It is way past time that we begin to improve not only athletic facilities, as we have begun to do, but also improve access to athletics. They aren't the main thing, but they are a very, very important supplemental piece to what we do, and it can make the difference for many children. the board will see this evening that we have some recommendations to increase some assistant coach stipends and to add some assistant coaches at the middle school level. But we need to add new programs to the middle school, and in particular ones that our young ladies can participate in. When you start to look at what we have for our gentlemen versus what we have for our young ladies at the middle school level, it doesn't equal out. And so I would prefer to get ahead of any potential issues. So we would like to add a head volleyball coach stipend for both of our middle schools. And we would like to add a boys and girls soccer coach stipend, so 2 stipends at each building, to begin to offer soccer at the middle school level. Next, please, Laura. And finally, we would like to continue our efforts to acquire and employ more school security officers. I will start at Orange County High School, where we would like to add a security officer there, as well as at the Locust Grove Middle School and Prospect Heights Middle School. We are, again, competing for grant funding that would cover half, approximately, of the salary and benefits for 2 positions, 1 at each middle school. And we are very hopeful that we could acquire those. And finally, in line with a minute ago, the discussion, we have coaching and extracurricular stipends that we pay that are really good and really competitive. And we have others that are abysmal. And a prime example would be what we pay our buddies and mentors, our teachers who work with and mentor and coach our new folks coming in. I don't think that $300, I'm sorry, I gave them 50 more. $300 really incentivizes that position. We need to do better, and so we will be, as we move forward, so by the time we get to February the 24th, Yvonne will have exhausted her efforts to dig deep to see where other school divisions, again, using comparisons to figure out what they pay, and we try to hit that to get ourselves at least to the median of that market, so that we can better compensate and appreciate the folks who are taking on these roles, especially in light of the hiring crisis that has befallen education. And we know that our workforce now looks tremendously different than what it did even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And so we need as much support and coaching and buddying and assistance that we can get for our new folks, because we are getting more and more new folks that are not coming from the classical clinical experience where you student teach and you observe classes and you graduate and you come out and you have done all of those experiences. We are seeing less and less of those classically trained educators and more folks coming from career switchers or coming out of school with a degree in a particular field but without the education training. And so now we are becoming the provider of the student teaching experience, and the student teaching experience is the first day they walk into the classroom with the kids in front of them. So that changes the dynamic of the support that we have to offer those folks. And so this is a light version window into the world of where we would like to go. Much of what we can accomplish on here will be dictated on the funding, how much the state is going to come forward. If new laws come into effect that require X amount of personnel to be hired, how much funding will be there to do that? We should know by this point, with constraints with LCI and SOQ formulas, we know what the barriers are. We know them well, and it is partially, now it's the main reason we are where we are today. But I'm hoping that this can be the year that we take a large step in a direction to become competitive and remain competitive in Orange. And so this is a little bit of what we want to try to accomplish salary and benefit-wise. Again, it is not the exhaustive list, and we will be doing a lot more work over the next couple weeks. probably many more meetings with our finance committee as we come through and the picture of revenue and expenditure becomes clearer. And it also gives an insight into where the needs are. And as you can see, all of these positions are needed in our buildings. And it would offer tremendous support to our current staff. And so that is what I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Hornick.
Thank you for the time.
Is there any questions or concerns from the board?
I had a few questions. How many responses did we get from that survey?
I will have to check. It was less than 100.
Okay.
So it was not.
I don't need an exact, just
Correct. Yes.
ballpark.
Yes. And we can get you the exact, but it was, I know, less than 100.
On here, I'm assuming this isn't all inclusive of everything new that you're looking to add to the budget for this coming budget cycle, correct?
I suspected there might be other positions. So here's an example. Tomorrow, Judy, Renee, and Lisa and Yvonne are sitting down, and they are going to do the final critical look at our SOQ requirements and how many people we are absolutely required to have to meet whatever guideline. And it is possible that we might find, hey, there's a small class of students in this grade at this building that we might then be able to use that position to hire a first grade teacher at Locust Grove Primary. So while that would be a new position at the primary school, it might not necessarily have to be a new position in the budget-wise. We might be able to shift it from one building to the other. So there are many things we have to do to critically make sure. What I'm trying to do here is show these are the areas that we have identified as the greatest need in our building. But there is a lot to be said for a number of other positions. So that's why this is the starting point. We find these are the ones that we have placed the highest value in, but it is certainly not the exhaustive list. So I think you stated that correctly.
Okay. I would just like to make a point that I still desire to have, we talk about mirroring Louisa and a lot of what they do we are desiring. And so with the CTE courses, I didn't see many new CTE teachers, and I also didn't see the CTE director. So that would be some points that I would be interested in exploring moving forward. Do you know kind of ballpark what the salary or the pay scale shifts are going to do to the budget?
Salary alone for the teacher scale is over $3 million.
In addition to what we've experienced previously?
So when you look at the easiest way I can say it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, when we look at the number of what we budgeted for this year and simply did a math problem to see how much it increases next year, salary-wise exclusive, it's 3.125 million, 3.126, right? And so now you will have some folks that will be retiring, and you will have, your normal course of attrition, and those folks will be replaced by other folks. Most of them, generally speaking, come in at a lower pay grade because they're less experienced. So there is going to be fluctuation. So it's hard to say that that's going to be the exact final number. And of course, we have to consider that there will be a slight increase in FICA and VRS as salaries go up. So do those metrics, and so that isn't included. But that's just a rough idea of how much that cost is. Now, how much of that comes to Orange County to bear, that's where we have to work with the calc tool, because some of that is going to be taken into account with the new calc tool with state funding as well. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the full hit to the locality. But that's just to answer your question as far as how much does it cost to go from where we are to where we hope to go.
Likely $3 million.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I received an email, and so I wanted to clarify, do we have a full-time SRO here at Teak?
We do not.
Okay, and I know that
So-
would be our budget, but
No, that's actually paid for. No, so okay. What we were talking about here, SSOs are our unarmed school security officers. So these are folks like Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Warren at the high school. The SROs are the school resource officers who are the uniformed deputies like Lieutenant McMaster. And so we do not pay for them. That was actually a significant investment on behalf of the supervisors last year or the year before to provide the funding to the sheriff's office so that we had a position dedicated to each building. What we have done, so there are currently, man, I don't want to misspeak. I want to say there are currently 10 SRO positions, and we base the 10th at the high school, and then are either Lieutenant McMaster or Deputy Holmes, who's at Prospect, will then help cover this building. So there are 10 positions. How we work, where we utilize them to cover is where we basically send them where we feel the areas of greatest need are.
okay. And then, apologies for all my questions, guys. Do we have room for all of the, especially at the Lucas Grove Primary School, needed staff? Do we have room in the building to accommodate the apparent need for these new positions?
So right now,
Up just a tiny, please, I hear like part of your question.
I asked, do we have the space available for all these new positions that are going to be coming down the pike?
Thank you.
okay, so one of the issues we had was we didn't have a chance to really delve into our demographic trend, et cetera. So a little bit of information on where we stand with the primary school. Earlier, at the end of last school year, and then again earlier this school year, I, along with Dr. Wolfrey and Mr. Finger and a number of other folks, Marshall, Mr. Arnold when he was here, Mr. Pitts now, went and would walk the buildings to get an idea of how many classroom spaces we felt that we had left that we could put classrooms in. And so at the primary school, as recently as October, when did we put your program in there, Susan? When did it start at the primary?
The actual class opened when we came back from winter break.
Okay. So as of October, November, we identified 4 areas that we could transition into classrooms. Each of them would require displacing somebody, whether it be a counselor or a reading specialist. It's not I want to make sure that it's very clear that there is not just a room there. These are being used and we're looking to turn them over. Now, one of those spaces, since the recent count, has since been used to cover another self-contained program that we had to add mid-year, that when you all came up and we spoke about and had the discussion. And so we have 3 classroom spaces left that we think that we have room for. And so bringing in an 8th first grade teacher would leave 2 classroom spaces left to house general education, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classrooms.
And then the final statement is not really a question, but I know historically we've provided COLA funding for our Head Start teachers. We did have a Head Start meeting earlier today, so I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar, that would be something that I'd be interested in providing if that's not funded through other alternatives.
Okay, so a couple things. So when we were that's an excellent point, and so thank you very much. The presentation was focused on our employees that are paid locally. There are 2 groups that are not. You identified one, which is our pre-K programming, and our other group is our food service employees. That is a self-funded program. Our nutrition supervisor believes that that they will be able to provide at least a 3% pay raise for our school nutrition workers, our food service workers, so that's a good thing. What Ms. Frady Lawhorn and Judy need to work with Heidi Lohr to take a look at where we stand as far as our pre-K programming. What we want to be careful of, and what I will caution the board, is if there is only enough in the Head Start federal funds or the VPI state funds to provide a 2% pay raise for those employees, we have to decide whether or not we want to essentially cover the 1% locally. Where that becomes tricky is we don't know where the revenue is going to be in any year further. So we will assume by doing that it is not a one-time purchase. It's not a purchase of a capital outlay. It is we will be carrying that 1%, which will grow, and we won't necessarily know what the following year's revenue projection will be from those programs. So we have to be very judicious, and that's where I think Sandy and Ms. Harrington and Ms. Anderson, when we are, coming down to the brass tacks, and the picture is going from right now it's somewhat cloudy. We have we as a collective and administration have a vision and know where we would like to go. The path to that end goal is still cloudy because there are still many unknowns with what revenues are exactly going to look like. But that's something we will have to discuss at that time, because those folks are not and have not been paid out of our local funding. We do a lot to provide pre-K programming, and I think we need to. We do a lot of things in kind. But that would be one caution that I would have, is to make sure that if we go that route, we understand the long-term potential ramification of taking the debt on the local budget.
Dr. Hornick?
Yes, ma'am.
It's true that the salary comparisons with the other 8 counties are only salary. No benefit
Yes, ma'am.
packages are included in that. And
That's
if I
correct.
recall the discussion from a year ago, that's tricky to figure out from other divisions. Do we have any sense of how our benefits package measures up?
So the county, maybe 2 years ago, did a comparison. It might have been 3 years ago. And we were terrible with our surrounding counties. And so they did a significant investment into our benefit package to get us up. And so we align, so our county and schools align for our benefits, health insurance, vision, all that stuff. So we're not bad as far as our benefit package goes.
Okay, thank you.
What I know anecdotally from our comings and goings of our employees, one thing I have not heard yet is it was the benefit side. It could be anything from feeling valued, respected, heard, all the way to I can go to Prince William and make $50,000 more dollars, which is quite honestly true. Step 30 in Prince William is 125, and we're currently at 75. Now, I'm not suggesting that we can or setting that as a target. However, if you are, let's say you work in Orange and you've worked here for 27 years, and maybe you live either in Orange or maybe in Culpeper, and I can hop on 29 and catch the southwestern part of Prince William, and I want to take the time to drive and get my highest 3, that happens for the VRS, because that your retirement is based on an average of your 3 highest years of compensation. So that's why we looked at our immediate competitors, and keeping an eye on it. We would be remiss if we didn't at least keep an eye on where some of the big boys are going, because it is not like we don't lose folks up north. It happens. So I feel pretty confident in where we stand benefit-wise overall, anecdotally.
Anything else?
I'm just going to say thank you for you and the team. Very clear, concise thoughtful presentation, and as it says, it lays out the priorities. And for me, the turnover ratio has always been the sticking point for me. It always, I hate to oversimplify, and Yvonne's going to yell at me for this, but we're training everyone else as teachers.
And we don't want to be the developmental league.
Right. And, I greatly appreciate and support the aggressiveness of tackling this. We've been kicking this can down the road for quite a bit, and we need to be aggressive. And again, I think you hit the nail on the head. We're not going to be number one in Orange County. We're not. We can't be number 8, though. There's only one below us, and that's Madison. We're losing teachers to Culpeper, Spotsylvania, and Louisa. And some of these positions, in a close proximity, Dr. Hornick laid out, he called them the big boys up north, but some of these steps are $10,000 and it's 25 minutes, down the road. And that's a big deal. So appreciate you looking at the priorities. And for me, the most important thing is everything you prioritized was had an impact on students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Harrington.
Thank you. I would also like to thank you. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you've put into the analysis that was necessary to both hopefully to bring our salaries up to a competitive level. I think that it also shows a huge respect for our staff, a huge interest in continuing to grow our Orange County Public Schools family, and so that we have that continuity of great teachers versus those that come and go based on funding. I hope that we'll be able to achieve the goals that you've set, and again, I also thank you for the clarity with which you've presented it to us, and appreciate it, so thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your time this evening.
All right, moving on to board member items. First, we have the policy committee discussion. I believe this was either at a previous board meeting, we had talked about creating a policy committee, whether it was part of our legislative committee, or if it was something that was standalone. So is there any other discussion you want to bring up for the committee? I personally think it's a great idea to have the policy committee help review the policies we currently have, help our staff do that as well. That's just, again, my opinion. So anything else?
I also, as you're aware, like policy, like process, and I think that this would be a great opportunity to, again, get those things that are important to us as a local community to make sure that we have a designated process going forward, and would love to be a part of the policy committee. I think that it aligns with Ms. Quinter and myself's interest and current work on the legislative committee, and I would suggest that it is done both on have kind of 2 parts. So one part is an annual review process and how that occurs, and then the other part would be how current policy is proposed and then brought forward. I love the first reading, second reading opportunity. So again, we have that time to think things through. And I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about this, but I know as we did within our retreat to designate Ms. Dawson and myself to kind of work together to bring forward some policy stuff, I would love to work with Ms. Quintern to develop that and maybe have that legislative policy coordination and have some guidelines.
Yeah, I also agree. I think that it would be great. I've generated a policy calendar that we could kind of scrutinize and go through with a fine-tooth comb that aligns with the legislative committee. I do think they both kind of go hand in hand, but different pieces are required for different puzzles.
Yeah.
But I would find much interest in being part of that as well.
And I know, Ms. Dawson, I believe you said in the past you'd be interested in working on policy, so I don't know if we want to have any further discussion about that at this point, or if I would defer and let you work on that policy if that was something you prefer, but I definitely think that it's part of,
I do think the legislative committee and the policy committee need to be perhaps the same, one and the same, because so much of what policy comes forward comes out of the legislature. So I'm happy to defer to you to continue to work with Ms. Quintern. And then you're going to give us all a report.
That's
within a
right.
day or two.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we're good to go.
yeah.
Before and after.
Do we need to have any formal action or that? Can we just agree that that's,
I think
will be part of the,
I think it should be two separate, only because our legislators aren't going to be part of developing
Correct.
policy, and we might want some administration or teachers or other folks involved at different points in the calendar.
absolutely, especially if we're doing our annual review. I love the fact that when we were getting updates from VSBA, they let us know who was in charge of that, reviewing that area of specialty or legality. So I agree that I think that those align together but do need to be separate in some level. Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, if you would accept a motion.
I would accept a motion, yes.
I move to create a policy committee. Should we nominate members after, or can we
Let's
do
do
the
that,
same?
the motion first, and then we'll come back and do a motion for the nominees.
Okay.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All right. Would you like to make your second motion now?
I would like to nominate Ms. Harrington and myself to serve as the two board members on the policy committee.
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. We
Thank
need-
you.
Thank you. All right, moving on, communication strategies. Ms. Dawson.
Okay, so these things came out of the conversations that Ms. Harrington and I had over the Christmas break as we were working on the norms and protocols. And what I'd like to do tonight, if possible, is just sort of throw them out there for general cogitation before our next meeting, and see what you think. The first is the idea of town halls, and those would be more formal sessions that might include parent information about, like, the vaping thing that we've heard about, or digital media, or AI, or data collection, all of that parents sometimes are not necessarily aware of, but we might be, to share with them. And then for the entire year I've been on the board, I've wanted to do this and just have procrastinated. The idea is kind of a coffee and conversation, just sort of bouncing all around the county. Set it up once a month, whatever, invite one board member, one other board member, if they're interested, to come. And as part of our norms and protocols, there's an item in there that says, each of us have an assigned geographical district. However, each of us affect the entirety of Orange County. So I don't think I have to just go in District 2. Number one, there's no place to go in District 2. If I want to have coffee, I have to go to town or somewhere. But, I could go down to Locust Grove and maybe Miss Harrington could join me, or go to Gordonsville and maybe Mrs. Anderson. And it doesn't always have to be me. It could be any of us. It could be some of the admin might like to pop in and just publicize it. I mentioned it to Dr. Hornick, and he said we could put it up on the website and just say, next coffee and convo is blah, blah, blah at blah, blah, blah at this time. It just seems like a way to make ourselves a little more accessible to our community, because when they come and stand at the lectern and talk to us, we never really have a chance to engage, unless they choose to call or email outside of that. We talked about the summer retreat. I'm really interested in parliamentarian training. Thinking of some ways to improve parent connections, like perhaps figuring out when the PTA meetings happen and, one or two of us showing up as we can. And then I'm particularly interested in a better communication strategy with our Board of Supervisors. So I'd like to think about perhaps scheduling, maybe bi-monthly, maybe quarterly, a chance for our chair and vice chair and superintendent and clerk maybe to meet with the counterparts from their board, just so that we can sit down and sort of talk about things with each other and establish a good working relationship. So just throw it out there, brainstorm, let it simmer, think about it, and we can come back to it later.
Ms. Dawson, if I could, the communication, the part of it is very intriguing to me. Your jumping of the districts, I couldn't agree more. Decisions by one impact all five. Couldn't agree more. That being said, I become disheartened sometimes. Ms. Quintern just asked Dr. Hornick about the survey, and we had, I think your words were almost 100?
Less than 100.
Okay, less than 100. I become a little disheartened by that. Maybe Dr. Hornick could have a conversation with some of the principals. I think the PTA, maybe the principal speaks to the head of the PTA at the schools, and they request two of us to come.
Right.
And we go.
Right.
And sit and have a conversation for an hour.
Right, that's exactly what I'm,
I think those are absolutely terrific ideas. Any type of engagement where we can learn a little bit more, about how parents are feeling, it's
And I think-
time well spent.
I think if it's established as sort of, something that we regularly do, it may start out as we go and sit there and count ceiling tiles or something, I don't know. But as people become aware that we want to engage with them and we will be here and we get the word out in whatever avenues we can, then perhaps it will grow. Or perhaps it won't, and we'll say this was a terrible idea, can it? I don't know, but it's a thought.
I would be inclined to figure out how we could increase that, but I think that ownership should be on each of us individually and not necessarily a mandated, once a month.
Oh, yeah, there was no mandate involved. If it's just me, if I'm the one who decides I want to do this and I do it alone, then that's on me. There's no expectation for anybody else to
Right.
necessarily sign on unless you would like to come.
But what I was getting at is, if we want to do it, let's just do it. We
Well,
don't
that-
we don't have to set anything. I'm more than happy. I held a town hall. Sandy joined me, and I can share with you the difficulties, the challenges, and
Right.
some of the things that worked. I'm happy to do that with you all. But if we're going to do it, I think we should
Well,
just.
there had been some discussion at some point about how autonomous can we individually be in order to do these things, and I think it's just the sort of that thumbs up of the board that, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do it, or you do it if you want to, and we're on board.
I would very much be engaged in it, and I would say to Susan and Judy, and pass the word to Renee, speak to the principals, Head Start. If any group wants to meet with two of us, or have us come and talk, or a breakfast or something, obviously Ms. Dawson's ready to go.
And I would
I
say,
think, from what I understand from her, she just needs coffee.
Just clarify.
As long as you have,
This is why, Dawson, why you come with me?
as long as she has coffee, I think she's good.
Matt,
Yes,
I would just want to clarify and make sure that as we go forward with this conversation or this process, that before an event happens, it is brought back to us at the board level to do a thumbs up or thumbs down. We don't want any surprises, and that these things will appropriately reflect board direction and what we're feeling, and if personal opinions are presented, that those are stated. This is my personal opinion, which I will say thank you very much, Ms. Quintern, because you have been really good at doing that. So I'm just, no surprises. Let's do it. Let's improve, increase our communication, and give everyone a level of comfort in being able to approach us and ask us questions.
I do have hesitation about getting approval on town halls. I know in other boards that I've worked with, particularly with employment, the whole board doesn't have to approve of a town hall because it's pertaining to that individual board member. However, I think it would be beneficial if we shared, when we have events, and just saying, hey, this is my idea, this is what I'm planning on doing, you're welcome to show up.
My thought was that it was more informative than asking approval for it, because each of us are elected constitutional officers, And as such, we have a right to talk to our constituents.
I
So
just wanted to
It's not so
clarify.
much, I didn't see it that way anyway, as you have to say it's okay if I show up at Witch's Brew. But that I'm telling you, I'm going to set this up, and just so you're informed ahead of time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on. We're almost done, people. Maybe. Policy discussion, revisions. There's some revisions and some new policies. Let's start with. These were from the previous, so IGAE, health education, physical education draft policy. There was some amendments to this, some additional verbiage, I think was the last, I believe the last conversation that we had regarding this policy was that we were waiting on additional information from the state. Does that sound right?
Yeah, so how this works, if I'm remembering correctly, is that the information brought forward in IGAE and a portion of the next one, IGAG, we're going to look at, goes into effect the next year after the board does the next round of adoption of standards. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the PE standards and health standards are next up in 2027, which would put the effective date then to be in the school year after that would be addressed. I'm 99.9% sure that's how it reads.
But if we approve this, this would go in, would our school then comply with whatever policy that we approve in the upcoming school year, or how does that work?
We would continue to offer health instruction aligned with the standards until the standards would change. So we have the standards that we have to hit, and then my understanding is these new ones don't go into effect and don't become part of the standards until the state does the next round of revisions to standards, and then you have your crosswalk year, and then it becomes part of schools adopt them as part of the curriculum.
So it'd be doing the school system a disservice by approving these policies prior to the required implementation of it.
Correct. We do not. These are. And I'll be a little nuanced when we get to IGAG, because there's something in there that isn't. We aren't waiting for, and in fact, we already did it because we were required to, and we'll talk about that when we get to IGAG. But the truth is, there is no pressure on the board to immediately or at this moment or quite honestly any time this year or even honestly next year to take a deep dive into deciding how you want to nuance the wording, because we are still in the standards and they have not been revised. So we go with what we're required to do and stick to the standards.
But I think the delay in these particulars was because of the discussion of the opt-in, opt-outs. So if there was language in there offering an opt-in or opt-out, would that be ignored or would that be implemented at the next school year?
So I'll go back to, I don't think we should establish a precedent where you opt into required curriculum.
May I ask a question? Or are you still?
So, but I don't know that necessarily answered
Well, I mean, we already have a policy that addresses if you have concerns about a particular learning resource or a particular content, that we address it and work individually on a case-by-case basis. So if you wanted to reference the fact that that exists, you could reference whatever it is, KBB, in this policy. I know that the hang-up is opt-in. I do not see a reason that we would need to establish an opt-in or an opt-out for anything that we're currently doing in PE. We already have the ability for parents to bring concerns forward about content, learning resources, etc., and address those individually. So I believe we already have it covered.
But would that be ignored if it was approved one way or the other moving forward? Or would the school...
Are you asking us if we're going to break school board policy?
Well, I'm just trying to clarify it because you had said that even if we approve these, it's not going to change anything until 2028. But if we approve this, would the opt-in or the opt-out, would that be ignored or would that be...
He was talking about the new policies in the green. So anything new we could add today, but why add it today when it's probably going to change?
But there's also blue. So I'm trying to figure out if we approve this policy, let's say just as written, would there now be a requirement for an opt-in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That just answers it.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, we will absolutely not break school board policy.
Ms. Herring.
Just to refresh my memory, the things that are highlighted in green are the suggested changes that we've received from the state legislator through VSBA.
That is correct.
And what I'm hearing is those changes will not go into effect until at least 2 years from now.
Right. So in last year's General Assembly, these were the things that are talked about here to add to PE instruction, which is really going to come to the health classroom, is where this is going to be implemented. It is now in law, but it doesn't go. The change that we would make doesn't happen until the state revises the standards and sends out new standards for schools to build their curriculum from.
So at this point in time, those highlighted things are not necessary to update.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So why are we choosing now to update if we don't need to?
That was actually my thought exactly. What are we talking about? Like, why is this on here?
The VSBA gave it to us last year.
Okay, so can we move on to the IGAG then?
Can we table this and bring it back closer time to when it goes into effect?
In 2 years?
2 years from now?
Yeah. Put it on the calendar.
I do have a question. So this particular policy, and we should be reviewing our policies every 5 years, I believe is the number. This one was last revised in 2018. So I understand that we don't necessarily need to make the changes, but can we review it and say that we reviewed it and changed the date?
This work that we're doing now is a review. So we would mark it that it was we would say 1 of 25.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's great.
What I was gonna the one part with IGAG, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up, if we could just defer for just a second. The one thing that is not in here that's not deferred and is required, and we have already done it because it's required, is this part here where it says each student enrolled in grade 9 through 12 receives basically an information sheet developed by the VDOE about fentanyl education and awareness. So we didn't have the information. The VDOE was a little bit behind as far as our first 2 weeks of school, but we sent it out within 2 weeks of us receiving this information from the DOE. So that is a component that it was not deferred down. It came out that you are going to the law mandated that the VDOE create this document. It was a 1-pager or a 2, whatever it was. It's on our, so we have it on the website, and we distributed this to students. Did we go 6 through 12, 9 through 12? So we distributed this sometime in late August or September.
So does this need to be further discussion and approved tonight, or is this?
This one would need to be approved, I
Would
believe,
be
because
needing
they've
to be
already
approved
sent out the
because it's already-
information, yes.
A move to approve as presented.
Wait. Please. Our guest, we
Can,
need a
uh,
second, and then we can discuss.
May I have a second?
Second.
With discussion.
Thank you. I have concern regarding the opt-in portion of this, which is a board member's suggestion. I just really do not feel it's appropriate to require opt-in processes, especially as this is a mandatory area of instruction.
That wasn't, I apologize, Miss, that wasn't my motion. My motion is what is, we've already sent out.
Okay.
We've already sent out the update from the VDOE.
Right.
I'm just moving us forward to match what the administration has already sent out, which updated what specific? Remind me
From
again?
from each to awareness.
Okay.
The last paragraph.
That was my motion. My motion doesn't have, there's nothing on there about opt-in.
It is. Look at the first
It's
sentence
first line.
In blue.
at the top.
Very first sentence. Right before concerning. First paragraph.
Okay, I must not have that on mine. I rescind my motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve this policy. However, I would like to offer an amendment with provides instruction with a signed permission slip concerning.
What do you mean signed permission slip?
I
Same thing.
want the parents that are going to have their students be learning about these things have, a syllabus that needs to be signed or something showing that they are aware of the content that's going to be taught to their children.
But Susan it's already out.
Right, it was, in the code, it says we just have to send it out. So it was sent out to students and parents.
So they already have it.
Yeah, but when you get things sent to you, do you always read it?
Right, but I mean, this is the conversation and discussions we had before. Like, I'm not raising 5,000 kids. I'm not. Parents need to take responsibility. Susan and Dr. Hornick, they sent the information out. We are required by law to update these things. They get updated. She sent it out. It's there. If a parent chooses not to read it, that's on them. That's not on us. Now, I fully agree with you that if I'm a parent and I don't want my child learning this, I have every right to take my opt-out of this particular class. I have every right to opt out. And that exists in this as well. Correct, Susan?
Well, it's not something that's actually taught in class. It's just a flyer that's.
Go ahead.
The question that I have is, as far as the stuff that's listed above where the flyer is, this is stuff that they are learning in PE, which would be included, I'm assuming, would be included in their syllabus at the beginning of the year.
Yes, ma'am.
So technically, they are signing a consent. So having it in writing, saying signed consent, meaning i.e. syllabus, or something along those lines.
But are the syllabus signed and
Yes.
returned?
They're supposed to be.
Is that accurate?
Some teachers will ask for it to be signed, some will not.
Is there typically a grade level that occurs? Where,
education piece?
no, I'm saying where the student actually has to sign, or the parent has to sign the syllabus, or
It
is,
really just depends on the individual class.
Okay.
Some teachers want to make sure that parents have seen it. Some don't require the signature.
is there, I mean, I guess, why wouldn't we be requiring them to have them sign it? I mean, technically, they sign the
Yeah.
code of conduct as well.
We'll just say
correct?
we are not going to get them all back, and certainly not in a timely fashion. Keep in mind, a health class doesn't run the whole year.
Right.
It is a portion of a semester. So if I'm health teacher X, and I have 42 kids in front of me, and 15 have returned it the day I'm supposed to start teaching about drugs and drug abuse, I only have another 3 or 4 weeks in that class before we go back out into the gym. What am I supposed to do? That's the conundrum. We would be setting our teachers up for failure. It won't matter what you pay them; they're going to be looking to go.
And possibly our students up for not being able to meet their graduation requirements.
Correct.
And what works effectively right now is that if a parent wants to opt out or ask for an alternate assignment, they do that.
I guess my question is, so they are all getting a syllabus, ultimately?
Yes, ma'am.
We are informing them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's where my question was leading.
I feel ultimately if we're doing our part to inform, then it's on the parent to follow through if there's something concerning to them in the material they're seeing.
All right, do we need to, Dr. Hornick, do you need action on this one, or you don't?
Yes, he does.
I would make a
Well, I
motion
mean,
to
we've
approve.
already done it because we had to.
Excuse me.
So,
Okay.
We've already done it because we have to, but now
The-
you
the
need
flyer part.
the school board to basically say stamp of approval for the flyer.
May I make a motion?
Can I add one more thing? Is it, as far as wording, in the opt-out section, could we do some type of wording where it says Orange County Public Schools provides instructions on the following concerning, it says concerning, items listed below will be supplied in a syllabus. Can we just note that it's in the syllabus of some sort so that they know that they are getting notified of it?
We require, at the high school level, we're
Yeah.
required to send out a syllabus in each class, so
I have no problem with it. Judy?
a truthful statement.
Quite honestly, it's likely already in there.
I'm sure it
Yeah.
is, but I'm just saying, if we have it in policy that we are sending it out, they are being notified, it is in a syllabus, and then from that point, it is their responsibility.
Since we're already doing it, I feel more comfortable having language in there signifying that we do offer opt-outs for,
We can reference the policy that you had spoke of prior, the KBB.
Yeah, well, is KBB correct, Laura? Why is this sticking out in my mind?
I do think it's important that they understand that they do have that ability to do that, and having that
Maybe
referenced in
KBB isn't
there,
even anything. Maybe I made that up.
I think,
Yeah, it's not anything. Okay.
It's also part of the notifications
have
that
no
we
problem.
send out to parents as well at the beginning of the year that
Every parent has the right to pull their child from a class.
KLB.
KLB.
Yeah, I was close.
so could I offer substitute language for that first line that says, Orange County Public Schools provides instruction or alternative instruction with a parent/guardian's opt-out concerning the following. So it's basically, or in accord, hold on. Orange County Public Schools provides instruction unless opted out in accordance with policy KLB concerning drugs and drug abuse, et cetera.
Can we table this discussion and have that amendment to think about that a little bit longer?
Well, my concern is that part of this is already in motion.
Right, so it's already in motion. She's done what she's legally required to do. We are past this, so we don't really have a significant obligation to do it tonight. There's no impact to us. I don't know that I agree with the opt opt-out issue also, and I'd like to have a time to think about that to see if I could
Yeah, we
come to an
already-
agreement, and maybe not in the first sentence, but at the bottom have some language about that. Parents have the opportunity to opt their students out. I just don't want them to say, opt out, because these kids, this is a mandatory educational and instructional requirement. So if they opt out, they will have to do some alternative assignment or project, I believe. And if they are required to opt in, things could fall through the cracks and they are not eligible to graduate at the time that they're intending or hoping to graduate. So I really want to think through the opt-out piece of it some more. And if that's not willing, if you guys don't feel that that's appropriate, I will just vote as necessary tonight.
I think if it's in compliance with what we're already doing, it just emphasizes the fact that you have the ability to, which I find an important piece. I think it provides a good compromise between my original intent of the opt-in and ensuring that there's full transparency in some of these topics that may or may not be delicate to students who witness drug and drug abuse.
Theoretically, I absolutely agree with that. I just want to see it in writing. I want to have 24 hours at least to think about it, percolate, see if there's anything that I do have concerns that at the end of the meeting tonight are not maybe right up front of my mind. And
I'd be okay with tabling this one in IGAE if I could offer the language to Ms. Byram for the next meeting on Monday.
I thought we already agreed to table IGAE for 2 years.
Well, that also had the opt-in, opt-out portion, so modifying both of them to exclude the second part. We never voted on the first one, we just moved to this one.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's table it and let Ms. Quintern send it to Laura.
I'll send it to you all
Thank
at the
you.
same time.
Okay. Then we have DJR, and we have 2 options. I believe option 1 was the original document that we looked at back in decades ago. And the second one is some revised wording on that one. Have any discussion?
Is it true on this policy too that the procurement law that had changed, that our attorney changed the wording on, is not currently in effect? When does that become effective? Do we know?
I believe it became effective January 1st.
So it is already effective?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And the cap went to what?
Whatever was sent here as far as where the limits went, what my original suggestion was we look through the language changes themselves that were brought forward by Micah and William seem to be viable and need to be considered. So when we were originally going through the process of revising, we weren't looking at limits. We weren't going to recommend a change to limits. We were going to bring recommended change to the language forward. Now, the limits have changed as inflation has impacted everything. What you get for $100,000 now, you get far less for now than what you did in 2015. Our original intent was, based off some of the concerns that came up last year, was to clear up and make sure that DJ-R was in line with current procurement law, and we weren't planning to recommend changes to limits, although we could either way, of course. We were just looking to update the language to make sure that it was current.
What did the state change it to?
Could you go to option? Is that option 2, Laura?
Yeah.
If you scroll up.
It's 200,000.
It's under 15,
Yeah.
number 15.
Whatever the numbers were that they put in here is what the current procurement law states, my understanding.
Madam Chair, I would move to table, as much as I hate to do this, option 2 of DJR to the next board meeting, there is another piece of language I would like to kind of morph the two. I do accept the majority of the changes in this document, but the original intent of having this policy brought up was to require school board approval for purchases at a certain level that were non-emergent in nature. And so I would like the opportunity to be able to merge the two ideas together for us to talk about cohesively.
So consolidating the two as one document.
Essentially, yes, just change, basically I desire to change 15A, just a little bit of the language in 15A.
Is there any other questions?
Specifically the amounts.
Correct, the amount, well, not the amounts, not changing the amounts. So under point A, says for purchases of $20,000 to $200,000 or $300,000 in the case of non-transportation related construction, a minimum of 3 bids or quotes, if practical, shall be documented. I'm fine with that. I would like to change the next sentence that says no formal written solicitation is required. However, preliminary school board approval is required. I would just like to have, as a board, a little bit more oversight over large purchases, and I believe that that threshold is rather wide.
Well, his cap, he's authorized up to, it's 100, Dr. Hornick?
99,999.
Okay, so he's authorized up to 99, and you want to move it to what?
20,000, and I believe.
Yeah, we spend more on that on toilet paper. So yeah,
Is that an emergency purchase?
it?
Could be.
We yeah.
Sorry.
I mean,
Yeah,
we're
so the
past
state-
2020.
The state moved everything to 200, and you said 15?
200.
Okay, so they moved it to 200. So he's at 100. He doesn't want to move anything, but you want to take him down to 20.
I'm not taking him down to anything. I am allowing us to have greater oversight, and I've had discussions with other board members here, which were previously in agreement. I don't know if that has changed, but that's why I would like to have some time, since we received this document today, to go through it, to review it, and to add the amended language that I was interested in exploring to this that's already here.
Well, let's look at the language that you bring back, but I certainly hope it's not going to be 20. If I'm in his shoes, that's just punching me. That's a gut punch. If we can't trust him to spend $20,000, then why is he here?
There's nothing about trust. It's about fiscal oversight.
But when you say that, you act like you don't have physical oversight. You see
Do after the fact,
Yeah,
after things are spent.
right. So you see every cent that is spent, but yet you want to talk about physical oversight, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Look forward to the language. I hope it's not a 20. So we'll see.
Is everybody okay with postponing?
Yes.
That was
could
a
I
motion,
just-
Madam Chair.
Sorry.
Sorry.
You had a motion?
I motioned to table it to next week.
Second.
Okay, never mind. I'll just wait.
Do we need more discussion? You sure? No, I'm sure. All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Thank you. And last but not least, JFCG. Ms. Quintern.
So this was drafted back in November, or I guess October. I had asked for it to be on the agenda for the December meeting. We didn't take any action on it. I did make one change after hearing some feedback, and just oversight on my part. I had intended to have an emergency clause in there, but point number 5 adds that in there. And so I feel this is a sound policy, and I would be interested, Madam Chair, in approving this policy this evening if you would accept a motion.
I will accept the motion.
I move to approve policy JFCG as presented.
Do I have a second? Or second with discussion?
I'll second with discussion.
Okay. All those in favor? Sorry, we have to discuss. My
Oh,
apologies.
that's right. It's getting late. The only word that concerns me is immediately under the date line, the purpose. Second phrase of that sentence, this policy outlines the guidelines for restroom access based on sex assigned at birth. I would like to strike the word assigned and replace it with observed.
Second that.
Okay, any other discussion?
Um,
You want to go first, or you want me?
Go ahead, I'm still formulating exactly what I'm going to say,
Formulating.
so go for it.
I'm very concerned about this policy. I'm extremely torn about this. This one is caused me quite a bit of heartburn. I greatly believe that we are not putting a policy in place that will do good. There are pieces that are already in place to ensure what the policy lays out. There are policies and steps that have been taken to ensure that this is being followed. I don't like the fact that we are singling out people. I want to stay out of families' families. I want to stay out of their business. I really do. But I do understand the society and the world that we live in. I think most people understand, you know, I say quite often, you know, we live in reality, and sometimes these things are tough. However, I do believe boys need to use the boys' restroom, girls need to use the girls' restroom. I wish we did not have to go to this step, but here we are. Ms. Harrington.
Thank you. I also have went through different considerations in my mind relative to whether or not I can support this. I feel, first of all, that the practice, based on my talking to administration, that this policy does, in effect, outline what is practice at this point. I don't feel that it needs to be put into policy because, unfortunately, I think that it continues to provide a level of division and divisiveness, and that it politicizes an issue that puts our students in a position of being used as a political football to make a point. I think that our students, absolutely, we need to make sure that we do everything we can to ensure the safety of each and every student within this division. But I just don't feel that it is appropriate to put this in policy. I feel that it does, in effect, open us up to a level of legal liability. I do appreciate you putting that additional language in there regarding the emergency stuff. But again, as long as I feel comfortable that this is practice and that there are appropriate results if something happened outside of a necessary safety issue, that it would be addressed by our administration, and I just can't continue to politicize our students and the divisive subject. I'm sorry.
I don't see it as politicizing. The political argument has been brought to our doorstep, and like it or not, we have to face what has been dropped at our doorstep. As you probably know, there was a lawsuit against the Department of Education over the proposed change to Title IX regarding gender, and a U.S. District Court has now vacated that proposed change, meaning that now nationally, the original purpose of Title IX to protect students' rights based on biological sex has been upheld. I see that as a protection for students, not a bad thing, to honor the safety and dignity of every one of our students. And I think if we make clear, there's no hate, there's no phobia, there's no trying to target anybody. If we have students who are experiencing gender dysphoria or whatever the situation may be, we'll do what we always do, and that is accommodate those people as we find, what their individual needs are. But in the case of boys are boys and girls are girls, we cannot blur that line, in my opinion, and I will stand on that line until the day I die. It is truth, and I will not live by a lie, and I would argue for this, for the safety and dignity of each of our students.
May I just ask for clarification? So if the federal government just changed the Title IX requirements or upheld the previous Title IX requirements, doesn't that in effect really eliminate our need to put this policy in effect because we're already obligated under federal law to do just this?
That is a good point. It is federal law, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we all know this has been such a hot button topic and politicized beyond belief by both sides and anybody in the middle. However, there still seems to be question about how. I mean, I get the questions in the community. Do you guys let, boys in girls' rooms or girls in boys' rooms? How do you handle it? So I don't think it's a bad thing to have it printed in clear policy. It's not targeted at anyone. It's just a clear statement of biological scientific fact that we will abide by in Orange County Public Schools. It's the way I see it.
Just a couple of things. If we're basing all of our policies, obviously we're basing them on laws, and if we're not implementing policies because there's already a law, then we would have to go through every other policy and look where a law is based. So I don't see this being or stepping outside the line when we already have a law in place, but yet we are specifically stating this as a board in our policies. I think that the comment that Jack said was very accurate. Here we are. We don't want to be here, but this is where we're at. And I think that we need to protect these private spaces for these young kids. And I would agree with the policy. We have a motion on the table and a second. Any other discussion? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Ms. Byron, motion passes. Yours was a yay, right? I didn't hear you. Okay, thank you. 4-1. Thank you. Future agenda items. Does anybody have any that they would like to bring up?
I've been working with VACOR for, 6 months probably, to really do a deep dive into our insurance, and would like to put that on the agenda next time.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, that what I plan on doing for these future items, I had already established a spreadsheet. I will put that on board docs. I would appreciate if board members would go into that document, put down what they have wrote, so that way we can make Ms. Byram's job a little easier and she not have to go searching through emails as far as what we're going to be putting on the next agenda.
You said it's in board docs?
It will be. I'm going to add another column for it, for the spreadsheet.
So up where?
Oh, not board docs.
I was very confused.
Google
because-
Docs. I did this earlier
Google
today.
Docs.
Google Docs. My
Okay.
apologies. It'll
All
be in
right.
Google Docs.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Um,
Anyone else?
I would like to have the policy committee discussion. In particular, the proposed calendar that I submitted some time ago. I'd like to discuss that.
Okay. And calendar. Do you want that under legislative committee calendar, or is that?
Policy committee.
Policy committee calendar. Okay, so 2 separate ones.
And then additionally, we've got the IGAE, IGAG, and DJR policies.
Okay. Mr. Rickett, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Mrs.
Do I
Sanders?
need to request for training, the Roberts Rules training, or is that something we?
We can bring it back up since we
Okay.
said we would. Go ahead. We can do that under comments if you don't mind.
Sure,
Okay.
that'd be great.
I do have one thing that I would like to put on, and again, it's really, it was on the, you should have all gotten copies of it, but I can resubmit that. Attorney selection process, I would like to look at trying to differentiate the two between the school's attorney, the division's attorney, and the school board's attorney. The procedures, looking at different law firms, attorneys, and going through an interview process, and then selection of representation for both the school division and the school board as 2 separate entities. So I can forward you what I had presented or had from the last board meeting, but just would like to put that on for a future item. And any other future items?
I can't think of anything else at this moment.
Okay. Board member comments?
I had a couple of meetings. The first one was the technology and innovation at Mary Washington. Right now, we're just discussing a budget. One item on the budget was VSBA. I had made mention that I had some concerns about VSBA policy services, paying for that through the Mary Washington. So if you have any comments about that, I'm open to hearing those in voting for approval or not voting for approval of the budget. And then I also had a Head Start meeting today. They're doing a lot of great things with parent outreach. For example, they had a parent cafe where they had an activity where they developed sensory items for surviving snow days. I thought that was very fitting and a really great idea. They've got another parent cafe on January 31st. They are struggling with turnout, but they're working on that. And they are continuing to have those at 10 a.m., which will allow for childcare to be provided. They are also starting to host evening events, and our next meeting is February 24th at 4:15.
Question, are the parent cafes here at TIAC?
They are held at different locations.
Okay.
So I believe that one was on the western end of the county, and I believe the next one is going to be Locust Grove end.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, though.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anything else? Ms. Harrington?
I can't think of anything else under future agenda items. I do have a.
The
under
board comment,
comments.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what she was on.
Just would like to, again, state that I would love to have some additional training under the Roberts Rules. I think that I would greatly appreciate that, and we would probably all benefit from additional training. Relative to our current process and practice and designation of the chair as our representative to legal counsel, I think that's how that works, right? That's designated, the chair is the one that has the authority to reach out and initiate.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever made it an authority type of
Just been an
setting.
informal process that has
Yes,
occurred.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the attorney is open to everybody's ability. It's just, we've gone through one designated person, just because if we're having everybody reach out to him, then obviously he's billing us all individually, so. that's-
Darlene, will you remind me, did we address that in the governance manual at all?
No. we
Okay.
did not.
Then what I'm thinking is, we probably need to. I think we need to have a designated person, and it seems to me that the chair would be the appropriate person. But I also feel that it should be a board decision, or at least a thumbs up type of a process. So if someone wants to research something through the legal, when we're having this discussion and comments, we can make that thought, that statement, and this is something I would like to have further legal opinion on. Is that okay? You know, so again, we're not doing stuff behind other board members that may be perceived as not being transparent amongst ourselves.
Yeah, I also
Does
think
that make
there-
sense?
There was something in your, obviously, it might have been related to the committees, but that could be along the same line where we can, you know, I think it actually was administration, when they respond to a thing, they will respond to everybody.
Yes, yes.
So it could be something along those lines.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Sandy, could I request that you and Darlene work together on getting a parliamentarian or something and scheduling that between you two, and then coming to us with a couple of plans?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like Darlene already has a,
Have some ideas,
someone,
yes,
so we
some
can have that
connections.
conversation and get that going forward. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Challenge accepted.
Thank you. All right.
I had just a couple of things. I had a brief conversation with Dr. Hornick as we're looking towards, we're in a new year. So the superintendent's evaluation will be staring us in the face again very quickly. So we had talked last time about the document requiring some formative assessment ideas, and he's got that, like, it's going good. He's really got that under control. Performance standard number 8, which is the measure of academic achievement by VDOE, is suggested to be more heavily weighted than the other 7. And so we talked about potentially making assessment scores a measure for that. But we'll have to flesh that out a little bit more as it gets closer. But the one thing that we did not talk about is we had discussed as a board using a stakeholder survey, which is another recommendation of the VDOE. And so I thought maybe we should think about, what does that look like? How does it go out? To whom does it go? And it probably should be sooner than later, because we'll very quickly get to June.
Yep. Yeah, definitely look at that
Yeah.
in February. Agreed.
And then the second thing, I had a very irate gentleman call about Veterans Day. Angry that we do not observe it and honor our veterans by observing the federal holiday. And so I went through this whole explanation of how amazed I was at what we do when our students are in school on Veterans Day. I was just in awe and very appreciative. And he wanted to get a petition together and, petition the board to change the calendar. So when the calendar comes up, if we could just keep in the back of our minds that's something that apparently a lot of the community are concerned about, that we do not observe the Veterans Day holiday. And I mentioned, tried to tell him all the great things that we did do, and he said, you can do that on Friday and be off on Monday. So, just food for thought.
Thank you. All right. Well, moving on to closed session. Ms. Dawson, may I have closed session motion, please?
Pursuant to 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia, the Orange County School Board will convene a closed meeting for the following: discussion of personnel or the performance of a division employee as authorized by Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia for resignation, termination, transfer, employment, salary adjustment, and retirement of employees.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. We're in closed session.
before you bring us back in, I meant to say it in there, but I just wanted.
Bring us back in. Ms. Dawson, may I have closed session certification?
Whereas the Orange County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Orange County School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered.
May I have a second?
Second. Chocolate in my mouth.
Ms. Byram, roll call.
Ms. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Dawson,
Aye.
Ms. Harrington,
Aye.
Ms. Quintern,
Aye.
Mr. Rickett.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the clerk certifies the vote as 5-0. Sorry, I just got tired.
Dr. Hornig, deposition of personnel action.
Yes, ma'am. Please recommend approval of the personnel actions as presented in closed session.
May I have a motion?
I move to approve the personnel agenda to include retirement, resignation, termination, employment, salary adjustment and transfer, and extracurricular and coaching appointments.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. If there is nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank